of course, the question comes up, well, what would I talk about? There's so much, right? And oftentimes there is a lot to talk about. But too often people feel like, well, I'm really heads down now. Like, we've got a release coming up, or my boss wants me to meet this deadline, or I don't really have time to sit down and think about a particular topic. There's just too many things going on, right? So what I often say is just take a step back and list out all the projects that you worked on, maybe in the last 6 months. You don't have to go all the way back to the beginning of time, but just in the last 6 months. And of those projects, think about something in terms of a problem that you solved, right? Was there something in particular that you were stuck on, or your team was stuck on, or a particular framework that you were using, and you just had to go through a set of hurdles that were challenging? Maybe you came up with a better process and you want to share that. Or maybe you came up with a way to solve the problem that's unique, right? You can talk about these sorts of things. The first talk that I did, I'd done a lot of public speaking in high school, but then after college and joining the workforce, I hadn't done any. So the first topic that I came up with was just talking about how I went from building a small prototype at Mint to then scaling it. And the audience I was in hadn't done that, or a lot of people hadn't, and so they wanted to learn that. And that's really all I talked about. It was what I had been doing kind of on a daily basis for about 6 months. And it really resonated with them. And I gave a pretty overview. I didn't dig into a lot of the code because I would have lost them. But I talked about some of the frameworks I used, and they really appreciated that because a lot of them hadn't built and scaled a prototype. So the other thing, like I said, is something you've learned, right? Even for those of you out there who might just be getting started learning Ruby, or a new flavor of JavaScript, or even something older like Java, right? You might have just learned this. You might have used a particular approach. That's worth sharing, right? Even if you say something like, I learned JavaScript in 5 days. Explain that process. How did you do it? What was the first app that you wrote, or what was the first project you did, right? People want to kind of hear those, not necessarily get-rich-quick schemes, but get the code rolling quick schemes, right? So a lot of times there's value in that. People want some of those shortcuts to learning, or even some of those tricks. Now, if you're concerned about coming up with a topic and will it actually resonate with an audience, will people think it's worthwhile, and this is a good time to test it out, right? Just like we all get used to testing code, we also have to test out our topics. And so one approach that I like to take, and what I used to do, is I actually would sit down with my boss, and I would say, hey, here's my topic, and here are the slides. What do you think is missing? Does it seem clear? Are people going to leave with kind of a high level as well as some next steps? And he would sit with me and actually be like, yeah, this is good, this is not so good, fix this. And that was really helpful. And then I would do the same thing with a few of my colleagues, and it really helped me to crystallize the talk. The other thing that I used to do was also do peer talks. And when you do that, it actually reduces the stage fright a little bit, because you've got someone else up there with you, right? So if you've worked on a project with another person, then ask them, hey, would you be open to talking with me at this next conference or at this next event, right? It's another great way to kind of have a peer session and somebody to work with.